Now let's get more perspective on the decisions reached today by the Monetary Policy Committee, and we are being joined on the news at 10 by the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. Thank you for coming on the news at 10 tonight.
Thank you, Olumide, for having me.
The Central Bank Monetary Policy has retained the rates, has kept it unchanged. Is this what the analysts foresaw?
Yeah, everybody expected that because we've had 15 meetings in 30 months and 2 changes. That's Nigeria. And if you look at the same period, in South Africa, they've had 11 meetings and they've had 6 cuts in the rate. In Ghana, they've had 11 meetings and they've had 4 cuts in rates. In the United States, they've had 5 cuts in rates all the way from 1.25 to 0.25. And in the Bank of England has actually cut rates twice. So there was no question of going other ways. Nigeria had to follow lockstep with the other banks because we have, 1, an emergency pandemic, and 2, we have an economy which had pre-existing conditions before COVID struck. So we had to deal with the structural as well as the tactical issues. Having said that, the difference between what we are seeing today and what we saw in 2016 is that there's more candor and more acceptance of the reality. Right, so nobody's playing games with anybody.
Do they have a choice, really? Because we're looking at the macroeconomics of it,
yeah,
and it's really bad.
No, you can be in self-denial, but in this particular case, I think there's reality. So last meeting in May, there was enthusiasm and optimism, and that we're going to come out of a recession by the 3rd quarter. Today, the central bank was very candid and said, at best, we will come out of, there'll be a U-shaped recovery, and that we'll get out of it sometime next year.
Are we in a recession?
Technically speaking, yes, you are, because when the GDP numbers come out for the 2nd quarter, it's going to be negative, and in the 3rd quarter, it's going to be negative. The Ministry of Finance made that clear today. The Economic Sustainability Plan also made it clear. So the difference now is that the policymakers are being more candid, right, and more realistic with the Nigerian people, so that we don't have a credibility gap. So that's the difference between then and now.
What's the implication for?
Yeah, first of all, the objectives were simple: to contain inflation, but in spite of that, we have inflation at 12.56. In these other countries, they have very low inflation, and they had room to cut rates. So the central bank said, we want to contain inflation, and they took some steps last time, signaling, and we need to see that materialize. Secondly, they want to increase credit, total credit to the economy. And we saw that 3.3 trillion naira of additional credit was created, bringing it to about 18.9 trillion, which is remarkable. To create jobs, if you look at the NBS data that came out in June, in April and May, 71% of Nigerians were underemployed. In June, this number has dropped to about 43%, which is moving in the right direction, but still huge gap. And then finally, supporting infrastructure with about 15 trillion naira, okay, which is what the central bank governor said. Now, the thing is this. If you look at inflation at 12.56 and your treasury bill returns at 1.95, there is a negative rate of return of minus 10.77. With this, you're not going to be able to mobilize savings. You're going to have the threat of capital flight. And so money is no longer a store of value. So the central bank will have to address this, but you can't deal with all of this at the same time.
For reasons of time, we have to get your projection for the last quarter of the year.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how does it affect the man sitting out there watching the screen.
On the street, yes.
We looked at 10 items. Of these 10 items, 5 of them, between last year, August, and this year, August, have actually, the prices have increased by more than 33%. For example, Gari went up by 92% between last year and this year. Yam went up by 66%, rice by 55%, and then, of course, cement stayed flat. But the reality is that, what are you expecting? What we expect in Q3 is this: 1, oil prices will stay at about 40 to 43, okay, much above where we put our benchmark price. Exchange rate unification will commence in an orderly fashion, right? Relaxation of the lockdown and slow recovery, just in case. But if there's a spike in infections, then we would have to stagger this. So we've already heard about schools. And the airlines started, we have load factors of about 30%. We expect this to go up to maybe 60% next quarter. International flights will commence maybe in August into September. So we expect an orderly exchange rate, but the negative things are this. GDP growth in the Q2, Q3 is expected to be maybe -3 to -4, and that's huge. And then oil production, we have to comply with the OPEC quota of 1.4. And then more than anything else, the third mainland bridge is going to add a lot of disruption to our activities, and
that's a very key factor.
Yeah,
there.
so
people don't know how important that bridge is,
absolutely.
but it is so important.
The thing is that maybe I think the U-curve by this time next year or by the second quarter of 2021, we begin to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. The CEO of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. You're watching the news at 10.